Good evening. I'm Andy Thayer with the Gay Liberation Network, and with me today is Vicki Cervantes from La Voz de los Abajos. Am I saying that correct, Vicki?
La Voz de los de Abajo.
Thank you. And before anyone says anything, did I get punched out or anything? No, it's a little medical issue, and unlike the, like the Nixon-Kennedy debates, we don't use makeup here at CAN TV, so you get what you see, and that's it. But as you saw in our opening there, today that we're going to be talking about the 6th anniversary of the Iraq invasion that is coming up in March. And there are a number of events that Vicki has been very involved with organizing, other folks who've been involved in the Pilsen neighborhood that we wanted to talk to about. And so, Vicki, tell us what's going on in March in Chicago on the 6th anniversary of the Iraq invasion.
Right. This year, the citywide march to protest 6 years of war, the occupations of Iraq, Afghanistan, and also Palestine, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and the war against immigrants that's been ongoing as well, is going to be held in Pilsen and Little Village. And this is really an important thing for those of us who do work in those neighborhoods, because it allows us to bring our community into the citywide movement in a way that sometimes doesn't happen. And it brings the city to us, which doesn't happen that often either. So it's going to be on March 14th, and it's going to be stepping off at Marshall Boulevard in Cermak. There'll be a rally at noon, step off at 1 o'clock, then we're going to march down Cermak into Pilsen and have a rally in Pilsen as well. We think it's really an important thing for those of us who have been doing work against militarization, against the wars, and against discrimination in Pilsen and Little Village. We're really excited about it.
And this isn't just an anti-war event. It's also specifically talking about how immigrants particularly are being scapegoated in the current economic crisis. For those who are not aware, there have been any number of raids on workplaces where immigrants are working in. The ironic thing about this is, of course, the United States, which has spent so many billions of dollars to impose unfair trade agreements with other countries, to install dictators using U.S. military if necessary. Well, what goes around comes around. Working people in those countries want to make a decent standard of living just as working people in this country do. And so people come to the United States. They try and make a way for their families.
Right. We see it that the same policies, economic, military, international policies that the United States carries out that lead to the wars also lead to conditions being unbearable for people in their own countries, especially, really it's worldwide. In our neighborhoods, we see it from Central America, Mexico, South America. People come not because they want to leave their families behind, their countries, everything behind, but because the economic and social conditions are so bad, they have no choice if they want to make a better life for their family.
Well, and for those who have seen our show in the past, the Gay Liberation Network is an organization which focuses primarily on equal rights for LGBT people, but we're not a gay rights-only organization. But that said, I did want to call people's attention to some things that are coming up. If I can get our PowerPoint presentation here to work. We'll have to be a little bit patient with this. And we'll see if this will come up. There we go. Freedom to Marry Day is going to be coming up on Saturday, February 14th in front of the Cook County Marriage License Bureau right downtown on Clark Street, across the street from the Daily Plaza. This is something that the Gay Liberation Network has been doing for a number of years, and as I said, Gay Liberation Network is primarily an organization which focuses on LGBT events, but we know that if we're going to ask for solidarity for our freedom struggles, that we have to extend solidarity to other peoples fighting for their freedom, and that includes other peoples around the world trying to get released from, frankly, the jackboot of U.S. military domination. And so I'm very proud to say that in terms of the event that Vicki has been talking about, that we've got this big anti-war protest coming on Saturday, March 14th at 12 noon. And as Vicki said, starting at Marshall Boulevard and Cermak Road, which is 2900 west and 2200 south, just a couple blocks away from the California L stop, for those of you who are public transportation folks. But Vicki, we're talking about why should people be protesting against the Iraq occupation? We're told that this occupation is going to end. What's going on here?
Well, I think the thing to look at is now more than ever, it's really important that we make our voices heard, that we want an absolute end to the war and occupation in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We need to really be careful, those of us who have been doing this work for a long time, that we don't think that just because an announcement is made that troops are going to be withdrawn from Iraq, that ends the occupation in Iraq, because we need to make sure that we're ending the total occupation. Contractors are being withdrawn, all the military, and that the people of Iraq are being allowed to work out their own self-determination, their own destiny in their own country. Also, we don't want to see the troops just go from Iraq over to Afghanistan and enlarge that occupation in that war.
Well, and unfortunately, President Obama has been parsing his words very carefully about this, and it's important to listen very carefully. He is a former attorney, after all, and watch out, because he talks about removing combat troops.
Right.
Why the adjective? I mean, we've had troops occupying South Korea for decades and Japan for decades.
Right.
So is that really the kind of situation we want in Iraq as well? Do the Iraqi people want that? Much more importantly, it's their country. Shouldn't they have the right to determine whether or not foreign troops are on their soil? And the fact is that poll after poll of the Iraqi populace has said, no, they do not want U.S. troops in any guise. They do not want the private contractors.
I think they've made it very clear in all the polls and elections.
Well, I think we've got a caller or two, so let's open this up and hear what other folks have got to say. Hello, caller. You're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
Hi, Andy. This is Kevin Clark with the International Solidarity Movement.
Hi, Kevin. How are you doing?
Not bad. I want to remind everyone that the 2 days after the action in Pilsen, on the 14th of March, is the anniversary of the murder of Rachel Corrie by the Israeli occupation forces. And I hope that every activist that cares about the issue of Palestine turns out in Pilsen on Saturday the 14th.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank the Gay Liberation Network for endorsing the protest on Sunday, February 8th, at the Auditorium Theater against the Bathsheba Dance Company.
Tell people a little bit about what that's about.
Which is the premier dance company from Israel. This is part of the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign that is going on across the country. There are protests in 4 cities at the moment being planned, and our goal is to shut them down if at all possible. And we want to thank you for endorsing this action.
Our pleasure, Kevin. I think it's important to note what Kevin was getting to is that there is a dance company that's funded by the Israeli government, which specifically bills itself as cultural ambassadors for the Israeli state. And worse than that, it has no Palestinians in it, even though the pre-67 borders of Israel have got a huge minority of Palestinians, and yet, like so many cultural ambassadors that we saw back in the day from apartheid South Africa, for example, this is a segregated a dance company, and so people in the United States and around the world, like they were in times past against South African cultural ambassadors, have called for a boycott, as have, I might add, many Israelis themselves, Jewish people and other people of goodwill who think that they're appalled by the policies of the Israeli government. We've got another caller. Yes, caller, you're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
This is Amy from CCAWR, and I was just calling to thank GLN for putting this march on the air tonight and advertising for it. And
Yep.
I have a question about if there's going to be any transit provided for people coming from church groups or suburbs or other neighborhoods that aren't a part of Pilsen or Little Village.
Well, I know for a fact that an organization of Muslims, I believe it's American Muslims for Palestine, is organizing perhaps as many 50 buses according to their national staff member. And so those buses will be going from around the suburbs. We're also encouraging different organizations around the whole Chicagoland area to organize buses. Unfortunately, both the starting point of the march as well as the terminus up in Pilsen are just a handful of blocks away from CTAL lines. So fortunately, it is very accessible for folks on both ends, and we'll be getting the transportation information up on the web very shortly.
Yeah. They're both stops on the Pink Line, just in case you want it. The 18th Street stop is down close to where the march is going to end, and the California Street stop where it's going to start.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to remind people, the march that we're talking about is on Saturday, March 14th at 12 noon at Marshall Boulevard and Cermak Road. That's right near the California stop, as Vicki was saying. And just wanted to pull up a few other graphics of other things, past marches. Most of these are on the anniversary of the Iraq invasion. The one that you see up on your screen there, you think it's cold today. It was about 10 degrees when we were out there on January 11, 2003. What we're going through right now is pretty balmy compared to that. This is another protest at Federal Plaza. Another big protest, people just flooding the downtown in that instance. And you see people not terribly pleased with Bush. This particular scene here, I think, is important. You see the Reverend Paul Jakes Jr. there addressing the Devon Avenue March on February 15th, 2003. That was the day of the world's largest ever protests. The protests, there have never been larger protests on any issue around the world on that day. People saying, don't do this invasion. That was our neighborhood march up on Devon Avenue on the far north side of the city, and thousands of people came out. So holding a neighborhood march as a citywide march, I think it shows that it can be done. It was miserably cold that day, but we survived. And this particular photo I like because it shows the Gay Liberation Network under our predecessor named Chicago Anti-Bashing Network, and that shows us on Lakeshore Drive. That was on the opening night of the war, as some 15,000 people flooded up Lakeshore Drive here, and there's our banner right there. And that was a great event, and certainly sent a message that many thousands and thousands of people in this country were not pleased about this war. And there again, here we got the information. It's end the occupations now, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Palestine. Stop the government's war on immigrants. And again, the specific information about where you need to go. Saturday, March 14th, 12 noon, Marshall Boulevard and Cermak Road. Now, Vicki, getting back to not believing the words or paying close attention to the words of our politicians, I think people are a bit numbed by the fact that the new president is now talking about yet another troop surge.
Right.
I mean, it just, I can remember back when then President Bush was calling for a troop surge in Iraq, and the anti-war movement was rightly livid.
Right.
And yet we're having another troop surge. I think it's very, very important for people to say that we don't care if you're a president with a D next to your name or an R next to your name. If you do the wrong thing, we're going to let you know about it.
Right. I think that is really important, and that's why I think this year it's essential that the anti-war movement, that the movement for immigrant rights, the other movements for different social justice issues, who all along have said this is why we're up fighting, this is what we want, that we stick to that. I think it's up to the politicians to do what we say is the right thing to do, what we the people want. And the surge didn't work to anything good. It only extended and deepened the war in Iraq and put peace for the people of Iraq further off. And there's no reason that I can think of to think that a new surge is going to bring anything good, and certainly doesn't bring us any closer to a just peace for the people.
And it's on behalf of an utterly corrupt government. The Karzai government is drug trade ridden as just about any government in history. The vast majority of the world's heroin comes out of areas of the country controlled by the Karzai government. The president's own brother is widely believed to be very integrally involved in the drugs trade. But this isn't just about Afghanistan. It's not just about Iraq. It's also about Palestine, because the war on Gaza is not over. What we've got is status quo ante, that the people of Gaza are under siege. The reason why the war started in the first place, for those who don't know, was not only the 60 years of occupation that the Palestinians have been living under, but also on November 4th, Election Day, Israel launched a raid into Gaza, killed some 6 Palestinians, and that's when the rockets started getting fired off again, and the breaking of the truce. And most people in this country don't know that because, of course, it happened on Election Day. But at the heart of the matter is not just the occupation, but the literal starvation and the denial of medical supplies, let alone any kind of economic inputs, trade, that would allow Gazans to even eke out a bare subsistence. I mean, right now the vast majority of people in that territory live on less than $2 a day. It is the single most densely populated part of the world, and it's basically treated as an open-air prison. It's not like Manhattan, where people get trades and goods going on to Manhattan or whatever. No, it's Manhattan with a wall around it, with no indigenous resources, or very few indigenous resources whereby people might make a living for themselves. We've got another caller, so let's, yes, caller? Caller, you're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
I know that Illinois Coalition for Peace and Justice has a calendar of different events, but I'm wondering how individuals can get involved with helping to organize these events.
Well, the easiest way is just send your contact information to the following email address, if you could, ccawr@aol.com. And we'll get you hooked up with information about forthcoming organizing meetings and so forth. We've been in a bit of a bind in terms of organizing this March 14th event until just a few days ago. We were engaged in a permit battle with the city of Chicago, which has traditionally discriminated against anti-war protests, and made it very, very difficult for us to obtain permits. But we won a very important victory in the appeal of their initial rejection of our permit application on Wednesday. And so a lot of the traditional information about this is the website you go to, this is where the meetings are, and so forth, has sort of been on hold while we've been fighting this permit battle. So please, if you want to get involved in organizing for the March 14th event, you want to get posters, you want to get flyers, you want to get speakers, or whatever you need, please just send an email to ccawr@aol.com, and we'll get you hooked up with hopefully as much information as you need. Now, Vicki, we don't have a ton of time yet. I'd like to revisit the issue of why this march is in Pilsen. And why are we going there as opposed to Michigan Avenue, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, it's a good thing to take these protests and actions out into the neighborhoods. And when we're talking about Pilsen and Little Village, there are so many obstacles to people in those neighborhoods participating in anything downtown and Michigan Avenue because of the problems with the war against immigrants, because of language barriers. There's so many obstacles that I think not only does it bring the movement out into different neighborhoods so people can participate, but in the case of our neighborhoods, it gives people an option to participate that they don't readily have if it's all the way down on the Gold Coast with and all those rich people in fur coats are kind of scary.
Who don't exactly treat immigrants terribly well most of the time.
No.
So that's not exactly where you want to spend your day off.
Right.
And I think it's also important some of the political issues. The fact of the matter is the United States is not only has a straight out economic draft, it's got an immigration draft, and many Latinos, they're like everyone else trying to provide for your family, but being undocumented makes it that much more difficult. And I think the government, both the last administration and unfortunately it looks like the present administration as well, is very cynically using immigrants' vulnerability, particularly in this era of increased raids, to make life difficult.
Right, and we're hoping that the fact that people are coming to the neighborhoods and that one of the reasons they're coming is to support immigrant rights, is to call for an end to all the raids and deportations, and for an amnesty, a legalization for all, and then a fair and real immigration reform that gives legalization and resolves this question. I think people will be, it's really a good thing for our neighborhoods. It's a great advance that people would come to the neighborhood and support these demands.
And before you toss out the phrase, oh, they're illegal or whatever, let's just remember there are any number of things in American history that have been illegal and unjust. Segregation, any number of the laws against gays and lesbians, many still on the book. So to just say, oh, they're illegal, and to leave it at that, to leave out the context of the United States screwing over peoples around the world, and now screwing them over when they make their way to the United States. That's why we need amnesty, and it's a question of solidarity as well. I'd just like to close out tonight's show with a few brief announcements. Again, we have Freedom to Marry Day on Saturday, February 14th. This is not going to be your usual demonstration. We're going to have some interesting things going on, shall we say. And this is a demonstration that's going to be happening at marriage license bureaus right around the country on that day. The California court is going to be ruling fairly soon on our whether or not Proposition 8 is going to get junked, and that's why we need to keep up the pressure against them with the demonstrations like this. We also, of course, have got our protest on Saturday, March 14th. Sorry, sort of screwed up the graphic there. We've got our next GLN meeting on Wednesday, February 4th, next week. And our next show is going to be on February 13th. And again, if you want to get involved with the Gay Liberation Network, please check out our website, www.gayliberationNetwork. Again, this has been Andy Thayer with Vicki Cervantes. Thanks for watching tonight, and we'll see you again on Friday, February 13th. Take care.